My name is Elaheh Samani. I consider myself as a malware/software reverse engineer, and I'm based in Montreal, Canada. I was formerly part of Chrome protection team at Google Montreal, and recently I joined Symantec Modern OS security team. We continuously research new mobile threats, and we focus mostly on enterprise apps, but on both markets, Android and iOS, and we scan apps and provide detection for unwanted malware or any misusing apps. Today, I am going to talk about analytic SDKs and session recording technology. For those of you who might not be familiar with Session Replay, it's a technology provided by analytic SDKs mostly to monitor user interaction with the app. It can contain any information like touch, mouse movement, scrolling, typing, or basically literally anything, any interaction. And this helps developer to find when and where their application crashes, or it's for marketing purpose to see which part of their application is most popular, and this sort of stuff. But some analytic SDKs, they take one step further, and they want to watch you as you interact with the app. And they basically take in-app screenshots or the actual recording while you are using the application. I am going to show you one little... Okay. This is AppSee SDK, one of the popular SDKs with session recording capability. You see, you can browse all the sessions that are recorded, and the sessions are all in the third-party application or third-party servers. And you can replay the session to see where and when the crash happens. This is a legit use case for analytic SDK. But looking at other SDK like Breakout Room, this one is a calendar or a presentation scheduling app, and this is a sample recording where you can see all the contents and even user profile picture and everything. And on the right side, you see a lot of user-specific information. Okay. So in other words, we can say they are looking over your shoulder and watch you as you interact with the app. And the extent of data that is being recorded far exceeds user expectations. When you type in a form, even before submitting that form, or when you are editing a photo, a private photo in your application, everything can be recorded and monitored, and everything is done without any user indication. Because these SDKs, they don't need any specific permission. So user, most of the time, they have no idea that they are being recorded. Security concerns and incidents associated with these SDKs is not something new. We had a couple of incidents. Mixpanel in 2017, or AppSee Testfairy SDKs in 2018, and most recent one, GlassBox SDK in 2019, where a lot of PII information like postal code, credit card numbers, they were leaked. And with GlassBox SDK, a lot of big and popular apps, they were using GlassBox, Air Canada, Hotels.com, Singapore Airline, and Expedia. So with Air Canada incident, the problem was these SDKs, they provide basic APIs to hide or mask certain fields and sensitive fields. And Air Canada was using GlassBox, and they were aware of such APIs to mask certain fields. And you see on the left side, they were masking credit card numbers or address information. But in another view, they failed to mask those fields, and they were recorded as plain text in the second screenshot in another view. And it's the same, that's the case for password field too. The left screenshot, they mask the password, and that's the login page. But on the right side, the screenshots, that they are for initial login attempt, or when you create an account, they fail to mask a password field, and they are included in the screenshots. And Air Canada is one of the applications that collect a lot of PII information, passport number, date of birth, and credit card numbers. And it's not easy to test an app for this sort of stuff, because you have to test all views and all fields to make sure you capture all the interactions and nothing is passed. So it's not an easy job. Another problem with these SDKs is that they let you identify sessions by collecting and associating some user-specific information, like actual name that user used inside the app, or address, postal code, and or UUID, or any device information for user attribution. And these pictures are from, again, Breakout Room SDK, and shockingly, they put user profile picture inside the session, and beside other information like email address, name, and real address, and etc. As I said, they can also use unresettable unique ID or device IDs as well, like IMEI, IMSI. And despite all the recommendation that they tell us use randomly generated IDs per installation, we see a lot of apps, they're still using IMEI and IMSI or phone number, and numbers is high. There are different methods to take in-app screenshots or make a video recording. In iOS 9 and later, we have Replay Kit, but we can use to just stream video from the screen. But it requires user consent, so this is not something that SDKs would use. The other option is using UI graphic begin image context API to capture the content of topmost UI window, the top one, and store it as a UI image. In this case, all the popover and alerts will also be included in the screenshot. The second one is the same, basically similar, but capturing all the UI view content inside a UI image. Another technique is leveraging JavaScript bridge to manipulate or capture everything inside the DOM, UI web view DOM, and then make an actual recording. The only caveat here is that you need to have all the static information of that view stored in the third-party SDK, then mix it with what you capture from the DOM and make a pixel-perfect recording. This doesn't need any user permission or consent, and it's platform independent. And that's a popular technique used by analytic SDKs. So, all right, we talked about SDKs, but how do we detect them, and how do we identify SDKs inside the app? Or more importantly, how can we identify misusing apps? It's not easy to decompose an application into SDKs. You can look for static information like Android manifest or info plist or class dump, and check them against predefined signatures for analytic SDKs, popular SDKs. Or you can look into dynamic. If you have dynamic analysis, you can look at the trace dump file to see all the calls to the analytic SDK APIs. And a better way, or maybe more automated way, is to use classification and classify apps based on their method calls and the frequency. We expect API calls with the higher frequency to be part of SDK. And then you can try to extract the SDK name from the package. We looked into 5 analytic SDKs, and AppSee is one of them. With AppSee, you have server-side setting, and you can exclude user input or certain fields or certain views from the session recording, or nothing, basically, and capture everything. On the developer side, you have mark view as sensitive API, or you can use resume and pause right before and after entering a sensitive view. we checked our database to see if the applications are using these APIs or not. And with the static detection, we found around 24,000 apps that are using AppSee. And our trace dump shows that around 3,500 apps, they actually started recording during the dynamic analysis, and less than half of them used MarkView as sensitive API, and only 200 used pause and resume. So what about the remaining apps? Here's the list of applications that they started recording and they never called high sensitive view API. We see big applications like Cheapo Air, Adobe Photo Editing app, Argos Shopping app, AV's Car Rental, and etc. Testfairy is another SDK. Something interesting about Testfairy is that it provides a separate API to set user ID. It let a developer to identify sessions, basically. And you can pass or set attributes like age, phone number, and again, you see example here. But if you check the documentation, it says this API should only be used on a private cloud or on an on-prem installation. But we found 25 applications that they were using this API, and on a it wasn't private cloud. And for again, it has high view API, and with the static detection, 25,000 apps we are using Testfairy. 3,000 apps they started recording during dynamic analysis, and only 8 of them used high view API. And this set user ID, as I said, 25 apps, they're setting user ID. And I will give you an example of that application very soon. So these are applications that they started recording and they didn't hide sensitive views. We see this Badu, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this application correctly, a dating app with more than 100 million downloads. And the other dating app, for whatever reason, Testfairy was very popular in dating apps, I don't know. And we have our popular enterprise app, Slack, here. And Bolt and Transfer, they are money transfer app. And also Burger King app, if you are a fan, it's just one of them. And here's the example app that uses set user ID. And we looked deeper to see what it passes as user ID, if it's a random ID or is it something identifiable. And looking at the manifest file, you see it has get account permission, and it also calls account manager, which means it can grab the actual Google Google ID from the device. And it also collects other information like SIM card information and network information, and basically passes everything. GlassBox, I talked about it in a Canada case. The number of apps using GlassBox, they were lower. We had 583 apps in our static detection, and dynamic detection found 73 apps, and only 6 of them use set a screen as sensitive or set views as sensitive APIs. And example apps, I already mentioned them. UXCam is another example. UXCam is doing slightly better in terms of documentation. They have different APIs for hiding sensitive views or fields or a screen. They have separate APIs. And again, 3,000 or 4,000 applications, and only among 2,000 applications in dynamic analysis, only 217 they were using one of these APIs. And here's an example of bad apps that they started recording. And you see a Leafy application. It's a marijuana application to find nearby cannabis. And this might have some medical or, I don't know, user preferences in it. All right, so here's the overview of applications in each category per each SDK, and you see Testfairy and AppSee, they have highest number, followed by UXCam. And on the right side, we have platform distribution, and as you can see, iOS is dominant. So yeah, I just want to wrap up my presentation. Analytics SDK is not something, or session replay technology is not something that is likely to go away very soon. Developers and companies, they rely on this data for marketing purposes, and it's important for them to know where their application, what happens inside their application, and etc. But the fact that they don't publicize such behavior just shows that they know how creepy it is. And so after a Canada incident, Apple enforced all the developers to either remove this session replay or session recording behavior, or update their privacy page and let the user know. But I mean, still with Android, they don't have to. And also, the user, again, they don't have a clear idea of the extent of data that can be captured with these SDKs. Yeah, I can stop here. And if there's any questions, comments, feel free to ask. Yeah, so for Android, it's pretty similar to iOS. There's, I think, again, a kit. I don't remember the name, but for that, you need the user consent. But for the other technique that I mentioned, UI Web View, and using JavaScript, you don't need basically any permission. It's very similar to iOS. Yeah. Well, like I said, after Air Canada incident, it was a big news. And the only thing that happened after that was Apple asking developers to exclude such behavior or just publicize. I mean, just to mention that they are recording. But I'm not aware of any legal or any law change regarding these recordings. And it's, again, developers' responsibility, because SDKs, they just provide you some APIs and ask developers to hide fields. But even with those APIs, like the demo that I showed a few minutes ago, it can capture other contents like the actual text that inside app or photo that you are editing. They can't mask the photo, because that's the whole point of recording. Yes?
So originally, SDKs default hiding and why this so if it wasn't achieved this
well, some of the SDKs, like I think UXCam was one of them. They are hiding just password fields by default, but that's all they do. They don't care. They just want, their customers are developers, and they want to make them happy. And app developers, they want to see everything, right? Well, that's the kind of reason. Yes, sir. So I'm not supposed to kind of advertise for my company, but that's what we do at Symantec. We have a SEP mobile app, just icon. Here, that's the SEP mobile app. So most of the techniques that I mentioned here, we basically follow them, all these three: static and dynamic detection, and for SDK identification, and also for misusing apps, we have a combination of a static and dynamic detection to find misusing behavior. But I mean, it's not easy. Again, you have to look at both the static and dynamic analysis. It's not something. And again, even with dynamic analysis, if you see an application that is using hide view, it doesn't mean that they are hiding everything. It's just, they are using these APIs, but it's not certain to say this is 100% perfect app. Yes?
You analyze the entire App Store, subset of the App Store?
Everything from App Stores, both Android and iOS markets, yeah. Yes? I'm not sure if you're talking about the detection companies like. Well, again, they give you some APIs and the documentation, but that's the thing. That most of the time, developers, they don't follow documentation. They find the easiest way, and they just use a Stack Overflow mostly. And I mean, I believe SDKs, they can provide better. I mean, they can do better in terms of providing APIs or forcing them. One thing I forgot to mention, a lot of Crashlytic data and analytic data we checked, they send them to analytic SDKs over HTTP. And that was in the focus of this talk. And Crashlytic logs can contain a lot of PII information or enterprise information, can leak a lot of stuff. But again, nobody forcing them to use HTTPS, for example. That's something that you can actually enforce, but I don't know why. Maybe that's why we are in business and making money. Yes? Good question. I would say SDKs, because you can rely on developers. I mean, okay, let me rephrase my word. You can rely on developers, but for security purposes, I mean, because that's their business. When something like GlassBox happened, developers, they were not affected. It's the company that crashes. So I would say maybe both, but mostly SDKs. Any other question? Yes. Yeah, good question again. For snapshots, they can store them inside the app, so you can just go browse the recorded snapshots. But the end goal is to send them somewhere for analytic purpose and mining. So they send it to either the SDK company, like GlassBox server, or their custom servers for mining. But at the end, they will send everything to the third parties. Yeah.
The data that's collected from their business apps like this.
The idea is basically similar in web and in app, but in app is I would say they're just identical. They're the same, the amount of data, but the only difference is for web application, you might have more user specific information, but apps is different because inside the app you are dealing with private data. Like I said, you can edit your photo. Well, I mean, you can do the same thing in web browser, but web browser they might collect less private information or be less risky, but they basically the same. Yes. So a static analysis, if you are using an SDK, you have to define it in Android manifest file as a service, or you will see the package because you include that package inside your app. So you see it in class dump just by looking into the class dump. You see the package name, and then you can look into the APIs. And again, based on some signatures that you have, you can use it. But again, you just have to have a predefined signatures of common or popular SDKs. But if you want to identify any SDKs, that's, hard and tricky. That's where you can use classification method calls. And that's, again, static. You can just grab the class dump information. Or you can use trace dump if you want to have dynamic information, just to make sure. Because static information, that will let you that app has the possibility or a capability, but it doesn't necessarily tell you that it is actually recording. That's why we looked at both the static and dynamic to see if they start recording. And our dynamic analysis, the default is 2 minutes. So inside 2 minutes, and we see that they started recording. Yes. Yeah, it's either the company web server, the company server. You send it to. You can. I mean, there's setting. You can specify where you want to send data, or it's the SDK company server. You can send everything to GlassBox or AppSee, as you see in the demo that I showed you. You have both options. Yeah, you can also look at the network traffic to see if you see any connections to any of these. If you have list of known domains of these SDKs, yeah, for sure. But the only thing is you have to make sure that they send data in that 2 minutes or during your dynamic analysis. That's why. All right, I guess that's it.